It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter if you can buy 10 911 GT3s. When your baby gets balled up, it's not a good feeling. And the insurance side of it is that it protects you against that. And you got the peace of mind it's going to be replaced.
You're listening to Drivesport, the amateur track driver podcast. Here's your host, DMC.
Welcome to Drivesport. My name is Dave, but for this show, you can call me DMC. I'm a track instructor. I'm an enthusiast. And my goal with this podcast is to create something that helps you get on the track with your sports car, have fun, and get that car home in one piece. Now, that's an ironic thing on that last part because I'm going to talk to someone here who can help you with that. I've got the managing partner of OpenTrack Insurance, Justin Steele. How you doing, Justin?
Great, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
And where are you at today?
I'm in Houston, Texas.
Oh, fantastic. So tell us a little bit about, first of all, your motorsports background. What got you interested in that in general?
Growing up, both my dad and my stepdad were real big into motorsports, real big into cars. Some of my earliest memories were being out at the racetrack and, drag racing, NASCAR. And then growing up, motorsports was always just a part of what we did. I grew up in that world and it has been my entire life one of my biggest passions. I'm a huge Formula One fan. I'm just an avid motorsports fan and anything I've ever done, in terms of professional life has been so that I could pay to be on track.
And how did you get involved with OpenTrack? And by the way, for those who are unfamiliar, HPDE stands for High Performance Driving Education. That's pretty much what they're covering at OpenTrack. That's what I coach people to do when I'm out at the track.
So, my background's not in insurance, and I was working in a different profession at the time, and I was taking my car to the track, and I couldn't really find anybody that had insurance options. And this was quite a while ago. And I would go to normal insurance brokers or normal insurance agencies, and they'd just tell me, well, you can't insure your car on a racetrack. That doesn't exist. And I've always been the kind of person when there's a problem, I try to create my own solution. If nobody else has a solution, I'll find one or I'll create one. So I had a buddy in Austin, Texas that had an insurance agency, and I basically went to him. I said, hey, I'm going to get licensed, and the only thing I want to do is my own insurance. I don't want to do anybody else's or anything like that, but I'm tired of dealing with, insurance brokers and whatnot. And he said, okay, that's fine. You can do that. So that's what I did. And I decided to kind of go down the rabbit hole of what insurance coverages were out there for what I wanted to do. And so next thing I'd be out at the racetrack and, on a track day weekend or whatever. And this topic always comes up. This was probably about 10 years ago. And, guys would be like, well, man, who does your insurance? Because I can't find anybody. I said, well, I do my own. And they'd say, well, can you do mine too? Which
as an entrepreneur is a sign that you have something, right? When people are reaching out to you and asking you to help them, that's a sign that you should probably pay attention to, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it was something that was like, hey, I think I've got a business here, and this is something I'm passionate about. And it wasn't my primary profession, but it was something that I was definitely passionate about and that I was good at. So I'd say probably about a year after that, I made the connection with OpenTrack because I tried a couple of different on-track insurance companies, wasn't really happy with the service. And so I made a connection with OpenTrack with the original founders, which are Ben Phillips and Jared Blakestead, both great guys, still have a great relationship with them. And, I said, hey, look, I'm out at the track all the time and I think I can help you guys. I think I can sell a bunch of this insurance. And so I don't know if I was their first independent agent, but I know I was one of the first. So I just started running around these tracks with QR codes and I'd post them up on the walls of the garage. Like, hey, if you need insurance, get it here, right? Scan this code. And so, kind of fast forward to, I built up a pretty good sized book of business on my own. And then a pretty large insurance brokerage that you might have heard of called Marsh McLennan, the largest broker in the world. They approached me and wanted to buy my book of business. And then they wanted for me to come on and basically work for them and help them expand motorsports in their collector car, which is ultimately what I did. I did that for a while. I kept my relationship with OpenTrack really strong. And ultimately, Ben and Jared, the original owners, they sold their agency. They sold OpenTrack to a company called Trucordia. And Trucordia basically took a step back and said, hey, we don't know anything about this business in terms of the open track side of it. They know insurance, but they don't know track insurance. So they basically headhunted me down and said, hey, can you come run this thing for us? We know you have the background. We know that you know the business. And so about a year ago, when Ben and Jared were making their final, right before they departed, about a month before, they brought me in and I took over when they left.
So when I coach people out at the track, I often ask them, do you have insurance? And one of the first questions is insurance. Why do I need insurance? Doesn't my existing policy cover something like this? So could you summarize kind of briefly why track insurance is different and why it's important?
Yeah, absolutely. So any standard auto policy that would cover your car on a road is going to have a clause in it. If you get into the weeds of your policy language, it's going to have a clause in it that says that any driving on a racing surface is strictly prohibited and not covered by the policy. And what they deem that as is you can be anywhere around a racetrack, but the moment you go into the paddock of a racetrack or the pit lane or onto the racing surface, your coverage stops. Where track insurance comes in is track insurance picks up the slack on where your standard policy ends. So we are the opposite of your standard policy. What we do is we cover your car in the paddock on all the racing surfaces and in the pit lane. So where your standard coverage would end, our coverage picks up and provides the full coverage for your car in those places. But we don't cover it on the road or anywhere else.
So a phrase that I've heard people say is, don't put anything on the track you're not prepared to push off a cliff. What's your response or take on that mindset?
Well, that's the old school mindset, right? If you bend it, you mend it, right? And it is a true statement, but it's something that is an unnecessary risk these days. And it really comes from a place of, to your point, a lot of people don't have an understanding of their insurance, and they don't have an understanding of the insurance space. And any responsible individual carries insurance on everything that they have. You don't have to carry insurance on your wife's engagement ring, but you do, because if you lose it, why would you come out of pocket for all of that, whatever the amount may be? The biggest thing that I think that we run into is just like you already brought up, is people just don't know it exists. We did a study when I was at another agency back at Marsh. We did a study in 2022. We polled about 1,000 people at various racetracks all over the country on HPDE days and asked them, do you know that track insurance exists? And only 11% actually even realized that track insurance was a thing. And, of that 11%, only 3% were purchasing it, because a large number of the people thought that track insurance only applied to race cars, or they thought that their regular insurance would cover them on track. So, with the insurance, it's just kind of like I said before, it's a fiscally responsible thing. And once you know it exists, it's kind of, you're doing yourself a disservice, especially if you're going to be at the track, right? Because anybody that's been on track enough knows that it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when, right? Something is going to happen. You can be Max Verstappen and something will still happen, right? But, the thing is, what I try to explain to people, and I was an instructor for a while as well. I've gotten to the point now where I cannot ride in the right seat at all, but you can be the best driver in the world and you can have the most skill, fastest reflexes. It doesn't matter. You can't outdrive a mechanical failure. These are cars. These are machines. Things break. And that's not you as a driver. That's just the reality of physics and, one force acting on another. And so what insurance does in that, when I used to give that spiel, it was to tell drivers, hey, be prepared, right? Because know where your runoff room is, know where your escape room is, and keep in mind, this is not for competition. You're not going to get a big paycheck if you shave that extra quarter of a second off, right? But it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter if you can buy 10 911 GT3s in cash. When your baby gets balled up, it's not a good feeling, and nobody likes it. And the insurance side of it is that it protects you against that. And, you got the peace of mind it's going to be replaced.
Yeah. One of the things that I like about it, and I've had you guys insure my cars for 2 years now. I feel like I drive better with it. And I think that having fear in the back of your mind, like if something bad happens, this is going to cost me, in my case, it'd be $130,000 for that GT4. Something bad happens, I'm going to have to pay for all of that. And then that makes me start being tentative. It makes me start being tense. I start worrying about what's going on around me, and I start driving in a less safe way. So for me, part of it is just feeling more comfortable on the track and having more fun.
Well, that's the ultimate goal, right? For starters, the more comfortable you are, to your point, you're going to drive better and you're actually going to go faster, right? The more you relax, the more you don't white knuckle the steering wheel, the more you don't try to overdrive the car. Because to your point, when you're worried about everything, what do? Now you start making adjustments that you didn't need to make, right? You're overdriving now because you don't want to wreck. And, and it's kind of funny that, I was having a conversation recently with a major manufacturer that just ran some laps on the Nürburgring. They tested one of their cars, but one of the cars I was kind of disappointed with the numbers that it put out. And I made a comment to him about that. And they said, well, to the driver about that. And he said, well, the car's actually faster. The problem is this manufacturer, there's a standing rule. If you wreck the car, they fire you as a driver. And this same driver used to drive for Porsche. And he said, the difference with Porsche was they would rather you wreck going fast than go slow. And so as a driver, when your job is hanging on the line, you're going to just naturally go slower because you're scared. Whereas when you hop in the car and you don't have anything to worry about, but just go as quick as you can, as safely as you can, and everything's going to be all right, you're going to put in a better lap and you're going to have more fun doing it.
Well, and that's the key too, is we're all out here trying to have fun. So if we're nervous and anxious the whole time, then we're limiting the very thing that we're trying to do when we go out on the track.
Yeah, absolutely. It defeats the purpose of being there, right? And I used to be out at the track with guys, and they'd be like, "Oh man, if I wreck, my wife's never going to let me hear the end of it." Or vice versa, the girls out at the track, man, my husband doesn't understand this hobby, and if I wreck this car, he's going to be so mad. Well, when you got the insurance, you're good.
Yeah.
And it really is that peace of mind to just have a good time, and like you said, that's what OpenTrack, I think, one of the things that sets us apart is we're not just an insurance company. Everybody that works for this company is an enthusiast themselves. And these are the people that are, if you have to file a claim, these are the people that are going to be working on it, people that understand it, people that get it. And, when we think about different content and things like that, we are always looking for things of value to provide to our clients, whether it's training videos, whether it's, hey, have you ever been to a racetrack before? Do you know how to set your car up? Do you know what safety equipment you need? And you're one of our clients, so you can get into your client dashboard. You can go to the video library. We've got hundreds of videos on there with Andy Lee, a professional driver, that's teaching you these things.
Yeah, I appreciated that. I saw that when I signed up, and then you can put in your schedule of which tracks you're going to throughout the year. And then it'll remind you, hey, we see that you're going to Sonoma. We see that you're going to Laguna Seca. Here's a video that we created about how to be successful on that. I think that's really great stuff. I want to shift gears just a little bit, though. In my background in leadership consulting, data is important. Statistics are important. I couldn't find anything about that online that was substantial. So I was wondering if you could give us a picture of how risky is it to drive a car on the track? Like, do you have statistics or data about how often a track incident occurs?
Yeah, well, so, if you look at our clientele, like I said, this year we're going to sell about 9,000. Last year we sold about 8,000 policies. And out of that, we had about 270 claims. So, if you just do your own math there, you're what about 8% of the time, 10% of the time, there's going to be a crash, right?
Which I guess is probably a little lower for your market, because statistically, I'm guessing someone who's more likely to buy insurance is also a better driver and more conscious of what's going on, right? I don't know if that's correct, but it seems like they'd be less likely to get in a wreck.
Yeah, but the thing to keep in mind with that, it's a hard stat to compare there, because when you're on the track, in most cases, if somebody else runs into you, you're also responsible for your own car. So the bad drivers can also play a factor in those in some instances, Now that doesn't mean, you can, we can get into this later. You can litigate against someone for hitting your car on track, despite that little hold harmless they have you sign. But I can tell you that I have been at the track so many times and had so many people tell me, I don't need insurance. It's not going to happen to me. And it's almost like the kiss of death. Like as soon as they say it, they go out and, and more times than I can count. And it's kind of a heartbreaking situation for me too, when that occurs, because they know it's there and they chose not to take it. And now they're not only is their car messed up, but the track is messed up. That's something to think about too. Where are you putting your car on track? Are you going to VIR? Are you going to Road America? Are you at Circuit of the Americas? Because if you're at Circuit of the Americas and you run into a Tech Pro barrier, well, that's $1,400 a square foot. So if you take out a 40-foot section of it.
Yeah. And that brings me to what I wanted to highlight, which is your liability insurance, right? Because when I was investigating other places that I could use, that didn't seem to be an option at the time. It seemed like you guys are the only ones that offer liability insurance. So could you explain what liability insurance is and why that's such an important thing that you offer?
So we, to my knowledge, we're the only ones that offer true on-track liability. We have two options. We've got $1 million, or there is a $2 million option. It basically covers anything you break that's not yours, whether that be something on the track, whether that be bodily injury to another person. And it's incredibly important. It's incredibly important. And one of the biggest, well, for starters, it's extremely cost efficient as well. Our liability is extremely cost effective. If you're buying the insurance, it's a no brainer to add it on. But one of the biggest myths, and I wouldn't say it's a myth, but one of the biggest misconceptions is when you go to a racetrack, any racetrack in the US, the minute you drive on, you're going to pull up to a little gate, more than likely, and they're going to have you sign a hold harmless that says you're not going to sue the track, you're not going to sue anybody else, and nobody's going to sue you. When you get to your whatever event you're doing, they're going to have you sign one too. Those things are cannon fodder, and they don't hold up in court. You can speak to any attorney that will support that. And not only that, there's case law that supports it. There have been multiple cases of people being injured on racetracks and multi-million-dollar settlements coming out of it. The most notable one was a incident at Palm Springs where a driver had a coach in the car crashed. They both died, unfortunately. And the family of the instructor sued the owner of the vehicle's family. It was a $19 million settlement. All the hold harmlesses in the world wouldn't have stopped that, because at the end of the day, you as an individual do not have the ability to sign away the rights of a third party. Meaning, I cannot go to a racetrack and sign away my wife and children's rights to sue for someone who liably injures me or kills me. Same thing with a car, right? If I do something that's negligent or with a wanton disregard for the safety of the other people on track, I can be found liable for that. And what is negligence? What is wanton disregard? It's an opinion, right? It's an opinion of the other people on track. So you could have done something that was perfectly normal, but the guy you hit thinks it was something that was completely negligent and decides to sue you. If you have this liability coverage, now you know that more than likely you're going to have enough coverage to replace anything that was on that track.
So to talk about something positive, one of the things I love is, especially as an instructor, is the fact that the instructor is covered on the policy and that your family members can be covered as well, right? If they're over the age of 25, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of in the same spirit of us wanting people to just have fun on track and become better drivers, one of the best ways to do that is to have an instructor, right? And so that's something that is on our policy for a good reason. And it's because we want people to be comfortable taking instruction in their own vehicle. Sometimes the best way to do that is to let the instructor drive the car and show you the proper line, show you the right braking points, and all of those things. So the instructor's there. And then, the other side of that is I think that this is a family hobby. This is a family sport, and get out to the track with your family. And we are 100% in support of that. So if you've got family members that are over the age of 25 that you want to bring to the track, our policy allows you to do that. There are exceptions to be made with people that are under the age of 25. You just have to reach out to us. We have to see that they have a driving resume that supports them being able to, one, have the maturity, but also the skill on a racetrack. We made an exception the other day for a kid that was 22, but has been professionally racing since he was 15. So obviously he's probably a better driver than most people on the track to begin.
Well, that's good to know, to hear that, because my kids, this is a family thing for us. In fact, the last car, the personalized plate that we had on it was FAM RV, because that was the thing my wife said is, well, all of our neighbors have these recreational vehicles where they're going out, but that's not who we are, but we'll do this. And so we called at the time, it was a 2015 Cayman GTS, our RV, our recreational vehicle. I take my daughters out to autocross and teach them how to drive. And my son, we hired instructors and put him out on the track. And I really love that you're emphasizing that. And that's something that I would encourage everyone to do, because it's so much more fun when you've got other people that you care about involved in the sport.
Yeah, it's a community, man. And I think, when you go, the first time you go to a track day, it can be kind of intimidating, right? Because it's your first time doing something you've never done before. And the more people the better it's going to be, the more fun you're going to have. And what you'll learn is that once you get out there, it's honestly, usually if you go to the same track, it's usually a lot of the same people. And it becomes kind of like a family environment out there. And we love that, right? That's what we want that to be what it is. We want it to be a fun, safe environment for everybody to go have a good time. And it's a usable skill, right? I'm not going to use playing golf in my daily life every day, but I do drive every day. So having vehicle confidence and control, and particularly with kids, I in my generation, and yours too, I could not wait to get my driver's license. I mean, I was driving everything with wheels on it before I got my driver's license. And one thing I've noticed, with this generation now, there's not as much emphasis on it, because transportation is a lot more readily available through Uber or through friends or through, whatever. And so, maybe they don't get their licenses early, or maybe they get it a little bit later, and they're not as confident in the car because they're learning at an later age. And something like being on track with professional drivers or with a driving coach, where you can really see what the car can do. And then you can also learn that you can control what the car can do. And when you get on the road and you're on the interstate, suddenly driving 80 miles an hour down the interstate or 75 isn't so scary anymore. That's the whole thing, right? It's high performance drivers education, right? So it's just a great thing for everyone to be involved in.
Yeah. I love that you help facilitate that. And then just briefly, I want to point out that you have both per event track policies and annual. So if you're just getting into it, you can just sign up and do it for 1 day or 2 days. If you're like me and you're a track rat and you're always out there, then your annual policy is a fantastic way to go.
Yeah, so we've got something for everyone. You can purchase the daily policy from anywhere from 1 to 4 days, and you can purchase the liability with that. Like I said, it's $75 per day on top of, the cost. The cost is determined by the price of your car, or the value you place on your car. And the changeover point from when it makes fiscal sense to go from the daily to the annual is if you're on track about 6 to 7 times a year, the annual becomes more cost effective. And once you get the annual, you're good to go. You can go as much as you want. If you want to be on track every single day, you can be on track every single day. Something that we see is the majority of our annual clients started out as daily clients. They gave it a shot, and then they got the bug, and then they realized, I'm going to be at the track all the time, and I need this coverage just so I don't even have to worry about it. I can just pack up and go, and I know I'm good.
Yeah, I love that you have those options for people. All right, Justin. So at the end of every interview, I like to ask what I call hot lap questions. So these are just real kind of quick questions that I ask you, and you give me a quick answer back, and we'll just kind of wrap this up on a fun note. You ready?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. What's the most expensive lesson you've ever learned at the track?
The most expensive lesson is don't go out on a wet track on slick tires.
Yeah, that's a good one. Favorite car you've driven on track?
I had a chance to drive a Vulcan.
Whoa.
It was once in a lifetime opportunity. It was phenomenal. Scared the crap out of me.
That's amazing. And what's a bucket list car that you haven't driven yet that you want to?
Oh, I'm a huge Ferrari fan. I have to say that the F40 would be my dream car to get on a track.
Nice. What's your most proud track driving accomplishment?
I think that, Circuit of the Americas is my home track, and I did a 2:14 lap there in a GT car, and that was it took a lot of work to get there, and anybody that drives that track knows that's a hard time to get down to, and I'd probably never be able to do it in a road car, but it was mostly the car, not me. But that was a proud moment for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What's your favorite track in real life? Is it the Circuit of Americas?
It depends on the car. It would either be Eagles Canyon or Circuit of the Americas. But I would say I would lean towards Circuit of the Americas because just the grandeur of being there and what it is.
Best piece of driving advice you've ever received?
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast, So the more you try to force it, the slower you're going to go. The smoother you are, the slower you are, the faster you're going to go, as ridiculous as that sounds.
It's tried and true. There's a lot of truth to that. And then what's one thing you want every amateur driver to do?
Ask questions. That's ask questions. Find experienced drivers and ask questions. The real racetrack is not. It's not a PlayStation game. These cars are very dangerous. On a racetrack, you're around a lot of other people. Find people that know what they're doing and ask questions.
I love that you brought that up. As an instructor, one of the things that I always tell my students is think of questions you're going to ask me after this session. Because if you're not asking questions, you're not learning. You're not trying hard enough, because we all have questions that need to be answered all the way up to the very top of a guy like Oscar Piastri or Verstappen. We all have something to learn.
If Max Verstappen has a driving coach, that should tell you something, right?
Exactly.
And, I lean back on, my prior profession, and, every day is a learning opportunity. And the minute you think you don't have anything else to learn is the day you should retire, because it doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how fast you are. You always have something to learn. And I think that the biggest mistakes, the biggest crashes that I have ever seen have come from people that just decided to jump on track and ignored advice, didn't do a slow workup, and it's unfortunate, because if you show up humble and you ask the right questions, you're going to have so much more fun, and you're going to do it in a lot safer manner.
Yeah. Be hungry to learn. Great advice. Justin, this has been a fantastic interview. You have so much insight into this. So if they want to get insurance, they go to opentrack.com. Is that correct?
Correct.
We'll put a link to that as well in the show notes, and we'll link it to this show so that we can see who came to you from that. Thank you so much, Justin, for being generous with your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an honor to be on here. If anybody has any questions, we're an easy team to reach. We're happy to talk through everything with you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Justin. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please, if you have questions that you'd like me to answer on the show, or if you have a suggested guest, you can send those to show@drivesport.co. Thank you for listening. Eyes up and stay fluid.
You've been listening to Drivesport, the amateur track driver podcast, hosted by DMC and produced by Drivesport LLC. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bidez. Music is by Elegant via Premium Beat Licensing. If you have a question, guest suggestion, or a track DMC should visit, please send it to show@drivesport.co. Please subscribe to Drivesport on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. And follow us on social media @DrivesportCo. We'll see you in the next episode.
Track days are fun, but also unpredictable. That's part of the thrill. When the unexpected and expensive lesson happens, you'll be glad your car is protected by OpenTrack Insurance, found at drivesport.co/insurance. OpenTrack offers full vehicle coverage and liability insurance, something you just don't find with most track day policies. And if you're a true track rat like me, they even offer annual coverage, so you're protected at every event throughout the year. It's a great deal. Get a quote today at drivesport.co/insurance. You can drive safer, be more confident, and have more fun knowing your car is protected by OpenTrack. Visit drivesport.co/insurance.